On the day we moved into our new house, I expected the start of a new chapter in our lives, but an unexpected event awaited me. As soon as we finished moving in, another large truck quietly stopped in front of our house. I became a bit anxious and asked my husband, "Is this truck ours?" Then the words my husband cheerfully uttered reached my ears. "Actually, from now on, my parents will live here with us." What, really? Why? I was so surprised that I couldn't find the words to respond. My in-laws went further and said, "If you oppose, we don't need such a daughter-in-law. You can't even show respect for us." At that moment, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. "Does this mean our married life is over?" I asked while laughing. "Huh?" My husband looked confused. This is the moment I, just after moving into our new house, realized there was a big gap between me, my husband, and my in-laws. I, Samantha, a housewife in my 30s, have been married to Victor for 5 years, and we have a lovely 4-year-old son. Initially, I quit my job to focus on the family. But now that our son is a bit older, I've started working again, full-time on weekdays. When I first met Victor, he was very kind and a bit laid back, which I found charming. Above all, I was moved by how he always put me first, which led me to decide on marriage. However, over time, some issues emerged between me and Victor's family. They cared too much about appearances, prioritizing their reputation over others' feelings. This was especially evident during our wedding preparations. They insisted on a grand ceremony, saying, "It's the eldest son's wedding, so it must be grand." I wanted a small, intimate celebration with close friends and family. But my in-laws wouldn't allow it. They argued that a modest wedding would be embarrassing and tarnish the family's honor. Victor's family is not particularly prestigious. His father is just a retired office worker, and his mother is a stay-at-home wife. Their home is just a mere rental, not fancy at all. Yet, they place great importance on how they're perceived externally. They eventually declared they would cover the ceremony costs, unilaterally booking a familiar venue. To avoid premarital conflicts, I reluctantly agreed to their plan, only to later realize it had placed a significant burden on my family. The groom's side, my in-laws, only covered their expenses, leaving my family to bear the rest. And during childbirth, the words my mother-in-law uttered while I was in labor painfully highlighted their values. The baby isn't born yet." I rushed over thinking I'd meet them already. This is a bit boring. Maybe I'll have some coffee while waiting," she casually complained beside my hospital bed. While I was in pain, my mother-in-law relaxed beside me as if at a tea party. "Samantha, are you listening?" She casually spoke to me, enduring pain. Even then, Victor was just an onlooker. He could have shown a bit more consideration. I was once attracted to his laid-back nature, but now it just seemed like insensitivity. Perhaps for him, his parents' behavior was completely normal. And this insensitivity continued after our son was born. Leaving me alone immediately after our son's birth, his parents, calling it a celebration, held a late-night party at our home, demanding snacks and drinks. Even when our son cried, no one made an effort to soothe him. That's why I kept a distance from my in-laws, maintaining only minimal contact. However, there came a time when we inevitably had to engage closely with them. We, a family of 3, were living comfortably in a rented apartment, but as our son grew, we started considering buying a house. Building a house is not just a decision. It's a major undertaking. It starts with finding a land, selecting a construction company, and involves countless meetings right down to the details of the interior. Both of us working, our weekdays were busy. So the meetings for the house were concentrated on weekends. Since it was challenging to take our son to long meetings, we often left him with my parents. But the day before our next meeting, my mother called to say she caught a cold and couldn't take care of him to avoid passing it on to him. When I discussed it with Victor, he suggested, "Why don't we leave him with my parents for a change?" I was reluctant to rely on my in-laws, but Victor didn't wait for my response and called them saying, "Can we ask you to take care of him for a day? Don't worry, it's just for one day. We'll bring a souvenir." Despite my apologies for the sudden request, Victor assured, "It's fine, they'll just look after him for a day," and ended the call. That moment planted a seed of anxiety in me. The next morning, we took our son to my in-laws and headed to our meeting. We bought sweets on the way back for them, appreciative yet eager to leave. As anticipated, my in-laws detained us, inquiring excitedly about the house. "Are you building a single or two-story house? Perhaps one of those trendy garage houses? Are you getting a system kitchen? It must make cooking so convenient for the younger generation. I'd probably cook more if I had one." My mother-in-law joined in with interest. Victor responded, "Samantha decided on the kitchen since I don't cook." Hearing this, my mother-in-law expressed a longing wish to try out the new kitchen. Trying to maintain a pleasant atmosphere, I suggested, "Why don't you consider updating your kitchen too?" However, she replied, "We don't have the money for that. If you're offering, I'd love a renovation." Victor casually said, "Once our house is built, come over. You can even try the kitchen." The kitchen is like a sanctuary to me, and the thought of others using it felt intrusive. After enduring more house-related questions, we were finally freed 2 hours later. On the way home, I shared my concerns with Victor. "Your parents seem very interested in our house, but they're not planning to live with us, right?" He reassured, "No, the house is for our family, and the kitchen is for you to use however she likes." Trusting his words, I calmed down. Since then, my in-laws became more involved in our house planning, offering to watch our son during meetings and suggesting various design ideas. "Show me the blueprint, let me give you some advice," my father-in-law would say, inquiring about the bathroom and living room sizes. He even advised on future-proofing the house. "It's good to have handrails at the entrance for when you're moving things around." My mother-in-law suggested a guest room would be calming and inquired about the kitchen sink height, too high, and it'll be hard to cook if you hurt your back. Their involvement grew, with advice on even the tiniest details. When I explained about the height of the sink, my mother-in-law immediately remarked, "This is a bit inconvenient for me to use." She advised, "It would be better if it were a bit lower." "It doesn't suit my height," to which I inadvertently responded, "I designed it to be most convenient for me." Hearing this, my father-in-law joined in, asserting, "The house isn't just for you alone. Victor will use it too, so it needs to be convenient for everyone." Though he said it's for everyone, I couldn't help but think, do I have to change everything just for the occasional visits of my in-laws? I glanced at Victor for support, but he just silently nodded. I began to wonder, for whom are we really building this house? With such exchanges recurring, my spirit wore down. I approached Victor, suggesting, "Let's stop leaving our child with your parents and ask them not to interfere with the new house discussions." However, Victor didn't see my point, saying, "They are doing us a favor when they look after our son. What's the big deal if they give some input? Aren't you overreacting?" I pressed further, "But don't you think your parents are pushing their opinions too much? Are they planning to live with us?" Victor suddenly got angry and shouted, "How many times do I have to say it? The house is for our family. If you keep nagging about this, we might as well divorce." I was confused. How did a discussion about the new house lead to talks of divorce? From then on, Victor started to threaten divorce over trivial matters. On another day, my in-laws visited and reignited the conversation about the new house. "Shouldn't we rethink the location of the bathroom?" my father-in-law suggested, and my mother-in-law agreed. Yes, this way would be more convenient. Victor was ready to call for changes, aligning with their opinion. When I firmly stated, "This part is already decided," my father-in-law became irritated. "It's not your place to speak. You should respect the opinions of your elders," he scolded loudly. My mother-in-law added subtly, "We're saying this for your own good." Yet, there was a coldness to her words. With no support from Victor, who lightly remarked, "They're just trying to help. Why not listen a bit?" My father-in-law turned to Victor and said, "Couldn't you have found a more understanding woman?" Victor responded, "Don't say that, Dad. Samantha, apologize. Otherwise, we're heading for divorce." I could only respond with disbelief. Internally, I felt at my limit. The relationship with my in-laws was always challenging, but recently Victor has become increasingly submissive to them. The kind Victor I knew was gone, replaced by a husband under his parents' influence. The excitement of building a new home had turned into daily heartache from interactions with my in-laws. Any complaints to Victor were met with threats of divorce. At one point, he even showed me a filled-out divorce form. "Why are you so cold? My parents are just trying to give advice, thinking of us. They take good care of our son, don't they? If you keep this up, I'm seriously considering divorce," Victor began to say. I was stunned. It was clear he would always side with his parents. Their care for our son was minimal. My parents were the true support, responding to sudden calls from daycare and caring for our son when I was sick. While my parents prepared birthday and Christmas gifts, my in-laws never presented a gift to our son, yet they always demanded something from us during visits. Victor wasn't seeing the reality of our family. Exhausted, I fled to my parents' home. Seeing my state, my mother immediately sensed something was wrong and kindly asked, "What's the matter? Are you troubled by something?" After I confided everything to her, she said, "You can always come back here." Her words lightened my heart. Indeed, I didn't need to force myself to fit in with that family. It was just a matter of making a decision. But my concern was our son. We just built a new house, envisioning a happy future there. But my in-laws' interfering increased, and it felt like it wouldn't be long before they took over the house. The thought of being constantly targeted and used by them was unbearable. Yet, if I suggested divorce, Victor would surely refuse. Despite often mentioning divorce, his family cared about appearances, so I doubted it would go smoothly. Thus, I started preparing for a possible situation. Finally, our new house was completed. When the three of us went to see it, our son was thrilled, running around the new space. Surrounded by the new house's scent, I felt the reality of achieving our ideal home. Victor and I discussed the moving details. The plan was to leave the second floor, designated for the guest room and our son's room, empty for a while, using it as temporary storage. I shared this plan with Victor, but he only responded, "Make sure to organize the stuff," while saying, "Why rush?" I already had a suspicion. Then the moving day arrived. After leaving our son with my parents, I immersed myself in unpacking alone. But soon, I noticed Victor was missing. When I found him, he was on a call saying, "What? You're coming now? But we're still unpacking." I sighed internally. "Your parents again?" Soon, another truck stopped in front of our house. I thought it was a forgotten item, but when the doorbell rang, my in-laws were there, carrying their belongings. My father-in-law entered briskly, asking, "Is everything unpacked?" Then glanced around and remarked, "Oh, it's not organized at all. It must have been hard for you, Samantha, to do this alone." Behind him, movers stood with large protective covers, politely asking, "Hello, is it okay to start the work here?" Confused, I thought. What work are they talking about? My in-laws quickly instructed the workers to begin, and they invaded our new home. I asked Victor urgently, "What's going on?" He replied, "Actually, we're going to live together now. My parents have always helped us a lot, especially with our son, so it's more convenient." I wasn't aware of this plan. I objected, to which he said, "I'm the head of this household. My parents have always advised us on the house. Mom is looking forward to living here. Wait, this house is for us and our son. There was no plan for your parents' rooms," I argued. Then, my father-in-law demanded, "The largest room on the second floor will be mine." My mother-in-law added, "And the room next to it will be mine. I wonder if the curtains I measured will fit." In confusion, I asked Victor, "Isn't this the first time your parents are visiting our house?" He revealed, no, they had been here before the viewing. "Why?" I inquired, to which he replied, "They wanted to see the house first, so I gave them the keys." At that moment, anger surged within me. I couldn't believe that my in-laws had inspected the house we put our hearts into and even decided on their rooms without us. "Why didn't you consult me? This is our family's home. I can't accept that our son's room will be taken away." I strongly protested to Victor. He retorted, We won't use his room or the guest room right away, right? The guest room is for when someone visits, isn't it? So what's the difference if my parents use it? He continued, didn't we agree to live with a family? That family includes my parents. Was I deceived? I asked in shock. Victor firmly stated, you're the one who was mistaken. I'm the head of the house, so no complaining. Then my in-laws chimed in. What's wrong with her? Is it such a problem for us to live together? Quite presumptuous for a daughter-in-law. My father-in-law criticized. It's natural for children to take care of their parents, isn't it? You're part of our family, so it's natural for you to take care of us. My mother-in-law added. But we built this house for our family to live in. Even the kitchen was designed for me to use, I counted. You will do the housework, right? So there's no problem, my mother-in-law stated. A daughter-in-law doing household chores is only natural, my father-in-law added. So, you're saying you won't do any housework? I questioned. Of course. What a noisy daughter-in-law. Victor, you don't need such a wife. Divorce her. My father-in-law shouted. Victor also declared, don't talk like that to my parents. We really will get a divorce. There it was, the mention of divorce. So, you're considering divorce, aren't you? Huh? At the moment, I couldn't help but laugh. We're practically divorced already, aren't we? I said, while Victor and his parents looked shocked. We're not legally divorced yet, I mentioned, presenting the filled-out divorce papers to him. What's this? Victor exclaimed. The divorce papers you handed me while saying I'll divorce you. Don't you remember? I retorted. That was a joke, he claimed, but I challenged, threatening divorce every day. And it's a joke? We're a couple, aren't we? Just a joke, he tried to explain. I could only respond with a bitter smile. I've never heard of someone considering threats as jokes. Plus, I've recorded everything you've said, all your threats, I announced. Victor, in shock, exclaimed, What? Yes, I'm taking these recordings to a lawyer. We're getting a divorce, I declared. Victor, now panicked, asked, But what about this house? I wanted a happy life here with you and our son. But it seems you didn't. Go ahead, live here with your parents, I stated. Then I added, once we're divorced, return the $50,000 I contributed as down payment. And don't forget about child support. I'll be raising our son. With that, I took out a cardboard box I had prepared in advance. Inside were bags and backpacks filled with mine and my son's belongings, prepared just in case. Knowing that my in-laws were trying to take over the house and that Victor was complicit, I realized that divorce was my only option. However, Victor, who was concerned about appearances, wouldn't agree to a divorce quickly. The divorce papers were prepared by Victor, but I decided to use them. He might think it's just a threat, but since he had already filled them out, I used them to my advantage. However, I had to confirm his intent to divorce to avoid the divorce being invalidated, so I also made recordings. He probably thought I didn't have the courage to divorce him, especially with a young son involved. But I'm not alone. My parents support me, and I can't imagine what would happen to my son if we continued living with his family. Therefore, the best option was to divorce and leave. My parents have supported me and welcomed my son and me. This is your home, they told me as I arrived with my belongings. At the lawyer's office, I submitted the recorded data and the divorce papers to formally start the divorce process. Over the next week, Victor contacted me multiple times, but my decision was firm. I believe it was the best choice for my son and me. While I avoided Victor's calls, numerous messages were left on the answering machine, mainly about the house mortgage, with no mention of our son, apologies, or his parents. It seemed Victor was more concerned about the mortgage than the issues with his parents. No surprise there. Victor had no savings, often spending on hobbies like casinos and slot machines. The money actually used for the house was solely my savings from before our marriage. Although Victor said, "Don't worry, I'll put the mortgage under my name," I didn't trust his naive thinking. That's why I had him sign a loan agreement for $50,000, stating he borrowed this amount from me and would repay it. To Victor, borrowing money between spouses might not have seemed like a big deal, as he signed without complaint. This loan agreement became crucial just in case. Even though we used my savings for the down payment and the mortgage was in Victor's name, he likely depended on my income too. He probably intended to make me bear the living expenses after his parents moved in. I'm sure his thrifty parents wouldn't contribute to the living costs either, but I had already decided to divorce. As long as I received the money I gave him and child support, that was enough for me. I had no desire to speak with his family again, leaving all procedures to my lawyer. I submitted the loan agreement, intending to demand full repayment. I was prepared for a request to pay child support in installments, but due to their pride, they chose to settle it in one go to sever ties with me quickly. How they managed to arrange the funds, I do not know, but that's no longer my concern. A new future with my son awaits me. I was surprised by their decision, but learning they gave up living in the new house and chose to sell it gave me a sense of closure. Without me, the loan payments became a burden for them, along with their dubious debts. Victor and his parents started a new life in a small apartment, facing financial difficulties. My mother-in-law, who had dreamed of a system kitchen, was deeply disappointed that her dream wouldn't come true. The kitchen, designed for my convenience, would have been too high for her, adding to her frustration. Moreover, the situation became even more complicated when the divorced sister-in-law and her children returned to Victor's parents' house. The addition of the unemployed sister-in-law, who had no desire to work, and her two sons, a middle schooler and an elementary schooler, made the house even more cramped. With only Victor's income and the meager pensions of his parents, their living situation became extremely difficult. With Victor burdened by debt repayment, their household finances were always in dire straits. There were constant complaints from neighbors about the never-ending arguments within the family. My sister-in-law complained that they were supposed to live in the new house, while my mother-in-law lamented the loss of the chance to use her dream system kitchen. Victor, frustrated, dived deeper into gambling, saying, "If you complain so much, I'll hit it big and buy a house or whatever," only increasing his debts. Rumors even surfaced that he borrowed more money from loan sharks, casting a shadow over their future. But this is all due to Victor, who always sided with his parents, so it's his own fault. I distanced myself from their life, starting anew with my son. Living in a rental apartment near my workplace is refreshing, and I find new energy in both my work and home life. When I come home late, my parents support me by taking care of my son, which gives me peace of mind. As I worked hard, I achieved results and improved my income. Thanks to this, I am planning a relaxing trip to a hotel with spa with my son and parents. My family is irreplaceable to me. Freed from the days of being manipulated by Victor and his parents, I'm now expressing my gratitude to my parents, who have always supported me, feeling the true happiness of family. Standing firmly on my own feet, I look forward to forging a new future with my precious family.